So this next topic is something we touched on with Claire about it's a systems approach to nursery certification. So it's the SANC program. So this is a pre-recorded presentation from Craig Regelbrugge from AmericanHort. Craig is in Spain, so he's not able to join us in person. Deborah was trying really hard to get him to join us online, but he was a little concerned about connectivity. And so he went ahead and recorded a presentation. It's about 20 minutes long. And the idea is we'll watch this and then we'll talk about, what we think. So we'll go ahead and get started. Do I start this from up here? Play. Oh yeah, I see it. Maybe? Come on, Craig. Oh, here, on the screen?
Craig Regelbrugge. I'm currently serving as executive advisor for the American Horticulture Industry Association, better known as AmericanHort. For many years, I ran our advocacy and government relations program and recently stepped back to a more focused role as a new team is coming in to run the show, as it were. But I'm still very involved in the plant health arena. And in that regard, my good friend Aaron Dillon asked if I might be interested in bringing folks up to speed on the systems approach to nursery certification and maybe how it relates a little bit to what's going on in the realm of citrus nursery stock production. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to share slides and jump right in with both feet. My email address is here, and by the way, I believe that this slide deck will be able to be made available to all of the attendees. So if there's any information in it, links or whatever that you need, you'll be able to get that. First of all, what is the Systems Approach to Nursery Certification, or SANC? It is a voluntary alternative program for plant production operations, greenhouses and nurseries, to be able to achieve the required state-level certification to ship plants interstate in the United States. Like it sounds, SANC is based on a systems approach, which we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a moment. The program was fully launched actually in the winter, January 2020, first winter of the pandemic, after a 10-year, two-phase pilot program that involved more than 20 different growing facilities around the country, different sizes, locations, product mix and focus, and so forth. The program, since its inception, has been a partnership effort involving USDA, the state and county, mostly state, but in the case of California, county also involved, plant regulatory officials, and then industry in the form of AmericanHort and our research foundation, the Horticultural Research Institute. What is a systems approach? Pretty straightforward. It builds a system. It takes individual measures, each of which have some intended effect with respect to plant pest prevention, and combines them into a system where all of the measures end up having a cumulative effect that achieves the required level of plant health, or as we often say, phytosanitary protection. The key elements in the systems approach involve risk assessment, the identification of hazards, the identification of critical control points where best practices can be applied to address those hazards. And then the system is supported through record keeping and both internal oversight as well as external regulatory oversight. Really, one way to think about SANC and systems approaches in general is that they're very similar to what we have had happen some years ago now in the food safety realm, whether it's produce or meat processing or whatnot, where the entire system is designed to prevent the introduction of pathogens of concern into the process, and ultimately to be sure that the product coming out at the end of the process meets the desired targets, in this case for food safety, in our case for plant health and freedom from regulated pests. So really it's the same kind of a program as we see in food safety, albeit the stakes are not quite as high because we're not usually talking about human health and risks to life. When the SANC program came about, I think it's fair to say that there was growing concern about the ability of the nursery industry to spread plant pests around, foreign or exotic pests being spread around within our country. And sometimes those pests might affect agricultural interests, like potatoes or cotton or melons. So we're moving a pest around that becomes a problem for other agricultural producers. Sometimes these plant pests may have environmental or conservation related concerns. So our industry is really under a microscope right now for the threats associated with moving around forest pests that are a threat to forest resources and forest health. Regulators are obviously concerned because this is their job. And then in the horticultural market chain, whenever things go wrong and pests of regulatory concern are shipped, it can result in very, very serious consequences: stop sales, destruction of plants, and so forth, and lost time, lost money, very, very costly. The program also, I think, was framed by a shifting picture with respect to financial constraints, both federal and state budgets that fund the plant pest exclusion, early detection, and rapid response efforts that are overseen by the feds and the states, but also sort of the inexorable margin compression that's been going on in the industry. So folks came together and said, is there a better way to be doing business? And ultimately, the goal here was to develop a better way to be doing business and to achieve or sustain a thriving horticultural marketplace. If you think about it, traditional nursery inspection in this country typically involves either a growing operation being visited once or a couple of times a year, or sometimes a load by load inspection is required, shipment by shipment inspection, where the role of the inspector is to look at plants and look for pests, signs of pest and disease. Very much a snapshot in time. There are key questions about, are pests of concern visible? Are they detectable? Are they at a stage in their life cycle where they're going to be found through traditional inspection approaches or not? So a snapshot in time only as effective as the inspector and only as efficacious as the appropriateness of the timing, depending on the pest or pests of concern. The SANC approach, on the other hand, is focusing on the entire growing process. It's a holistic approach that looks at the who, what, when, how, and why, and coupled with verification so that it becomes kind of a movie over time as opposed to a snapshot. Key program elements for SANC as the program has been structured. The first, really the building block, is the risk assessment process, which the nursery itself leads. We've fairly recently automated a platform for going through the risk assessment process, put a platform online that I'll talk about in a few minutes. But that function, the risk assessment, is conducted by the nursery, ultimately with the approval and sometimes significant involvement of the certifying authority, usually the state. Again, in California, counties play a role. From that risk assessment, a pest management plan is developed and a broader facility manual that lays out, sort of the facility is mapped, key elements of the facility are identified, key staff assignments or staff accountabilities are identified. Basically, the facility manual becomes the plan and sort of the contract, if you will, with the regulatory agency. This is you putting down on paper, as it were, what it is you're going to do, and then the inspection process really focuses on audits or oversight, if I will, that you are doing what you said you were going to do. So a bit of a different approach, a holistic approach to the question of plant pest prevention and regulatory compliance. This map, the colors and the types of dots really don't matter, but this shows where the initial operations were located. There have been a couple of additional operations that have gone into SANC since the original pilot. And I'm really thrilled, since y'all are meeting in California, to say that 2 operations in Southern California, 2 locations of Altman Specialty Plants, have been fully certified state and county. California was complicated because of the interplay between CDFA and the county ag commissioners. And so it took, frankly, extra time and extra steps, but the Altman facilities are now fully SANC certified, as well as the other ones around the country. Timeline for SANC certification, as a general matter, the timeline is normally about a year long. It can be done in a much shorter time frame. Willoway Nurseries in northeastern Ohio was already in some total quality management related programs, and for them, SANC was quite easy to adopt, and it took a little bit less spade work. But a typical trajectory is upwards of a year, and frankly, things get set aside during the busy season, as you might imagine, when all hands are on deck with shipping and fulfillment and so forth. Lessons learned as the SANC program has unfolded. It is scalable and adaptable. There are small operations, there are much larger operations, there are multi-location operations with growing facilities in more than one state that have gotten into the program. So it really is scalable and adaptable. One of the things that we've seen as a critical success factor is it really depends how the company sees itself in the marketplace and how it wants to be seen. So companies that embrace a culture of continuous improvement have been very successful at getting into the SANC process. It's not a remedial process to clean up a failing or a substandard nursery. It's really for the folks that want to be seen as the best in the business. The onboarding process it is very interesting in that it really has employees in many different functions being exposed to the importance of plant health, and that has direct implications for quality. And so we have seen, in terms of the tangible benefits that have resulted for the current operations in SANC, they're really mostly internal. Folks have reported sort of a culture transformation where plant health and quality kind of becomes everybody's business instead of just the business of a pest control manager or an IPM person or whatever the case may be. Growing operations in SANC have also reported quality improvements and cost savings, usually through reduction in pesticides and the catching of problems, either prevention or catching of problems much earlier in the production process. So again, these are mostly internal. And I think as you all are thinking about citrus and some of the marketplace realities, there are questions about marketplace external forces that I'll get to a little bit more in just a moment. As we've watched these nurseries get onboarded, it's very, very important that there's buy-in, strong buy-in at the upper management level in the operation, and at the state or appropriate level regulatory officials really also have to be interested and engaged in making this work for it to work well. Looking ahead, there are a lot of different types of certification programs on the market. Some are around environmental sustainability or quality management. The positive about SANC is you've got to be in regulatory compliance with your state agency that licenses or certifies nurseries to ship interstate. You've got to have that compliance anyway, and so SANC has the benefit of enhancing product quality, providing regulatory compliance, and reducing risk, which is an important consideration these days. A little bit about getting started in SANC, and I mentioned earlier that the risk assessment process has been made somewhat easier to approach. Back in the origins of the program, we sat a team of scientists down to basically consider what are all the key aspects that are common to plant production, and to break down the whole production system into a series of functional areas, and then to sort of develop for each of those functional areas a matrix of hazards, control points, and best practices that can be applied. And so this thing took the form literally of an Excel spreadsheet that was had many sheets in it, extremely complicated and really difficult to wrap the brain around. More recently, the Horticultural Research Institute, our foundation, has set up an online tool where you can request login information, and you can basically go through the process step by step, basically looking at each functional area, whether it's buy-ins, incoming plant material, pots and trays, water, vehicles, carts and tools, propagation, greenhouse production, container production, et cetera. All of these building blocks that may be relevant in your operation, and then to go through for each of those a series or a process where you're identifying, which components are appropriate to you, which hazards are appropriate to you, and which best practices are you applying now, or might you choose to apply. So that's the way this whole online system works. It's not wildly slick or fancy. It's just a workhorse basic ability. Basically, it gives the ability for a nursery to go through the risk assessment process from beginning to end in an orderly fashion, save their work, and basically build their risk assessment. So this, as I say, is now available to US-based growers. The website that's shown at the bottom here on the screen, hriresearch-sanc.org, is the place to go to request login credentials, and then you and your staff can jump in with both feet and work through the process. With respect to citrus, I want to offer just a couple of thoughts. First of all, SANC is an interesting stepping stone, and given the regulatory framework that already is really necessary to play in the citrus nursery stock business, I say play, to participate in the citrus nursery stock business, probably SANC is, you're already 80% of the way there, and so the two might interrelate, really very well. I think a benefit of SANC is that the 10-year process largely was about getting federal and state regulators on board and owning a change in the way business might be done. That process, as I say, was complicated, took a long time, and it was critical to a thing that's unique to SANC, which is state level acceptance. Receiving states, are aware of SANC, and they will recognize SANC as equivalent to the way things used to be done. Whereas if an individual state wanted to set up its own program, they're going to have to go to 49 other states and try to sell it. And all I can say after watching this for 10 years is good luck with that. I do wonder, and this is for you all to discuss, is there space or bandwidth for this kind of a voluntary certification program in citrus, and how would it interface with the complex regulatory framework? Or is the real need and interest of the industry more on the marketplace and marketing side? A limitation of SANC at this point is that there is no sort of overarching marketing program to make plant material consumers, whether we're talking garden retailers or landscape distributors or landscape professionals or individual consumers at retail, through all the different formats that plants move through. There really isn't a marketing program to make people aware of and to see the value and to choose a plant that's been produced under the SANC program. I think we all know that branding in this industry has collective marketing, collective actions have been difficult to come by. There are only a handful of examples where a plant brand has sort of been successfully established to where it's actually got weight in the marketplace. Might be worth sort of looking to those and what can be learned about them. But I do believe that the ultimate success of SANC is going to depend somewhat on the broader marketplace seeing value in it, so that participants are, frankly, rewarded. Risk mitigation at retail is a big deal. If a Home Depot or a Lowe's or a Walmart or an independent garden center have huge swaths of the nursery section shut down on a busy spring weekend, we'll call it Mother's Day weekend for these purposes, because of a plant pest incursion, everybody loses. And so, risk avoidance, risk mitigation is really something that buyers should be paying attention to. But we really haven't, in my judgment, crossed the place yet where the program is valued in the receiving marketplace. So the primary consideration right now is, folks who want to be the best at what they're doing might embrace SANC for the internal benefits as opposed to the follow-on market benefits. In any event, however Citrus Nursery decides to come at this issue, it's going to be very, very important that all the key players that need to be in the room are in the room and brought along in the conversation. And that certainly includes federal, state, and in the case of California County regulators, as well as industry itself. So with that, I want to just say thank you for the opportunity to be with you virtually here today. I'm going to be out of the country, or I am out of the country as you're seeing this. We do stand by ready if there are particular questions that come out of your conversations at your California convening, if we can be of assistance in sort of brainstorming how things might move forward. Obviously, we're more than willing to do that, and certainly all the best wishes for success, not only in your conference, but moving forward. Thank you very, very much.